When you sprain an ankle, it can be really confusing to know what you need to do because it can be so painful initially. It's hard to know, can you walk on it? Should you not walk on it? How much do you need to rest? What are the right management strategies early on to set you up for a faster recovery down the road? My name is Rob Drenning. I'm a physical therapist. Today we're going to go over those things today. So we did another video on when you should or shouldn't get an x-ray. So let's assume you know you don't have a fracture or anything else going on and you do have an ankle sprain. If you want to get it assessed by a doctor or a physical therapist, it's usually best not to do it in that first 48 hours. It's a lot easier to evaluate the severity of a soft tissue injury or a ligament injury at about the 4 to 5 day mark. So if you know you don't have anything broken, you've had the x-ray, let's say you went to urgent care, you don't need to go to your PT or your doctor in that first day or two. You can give it a few days and you can wait because it's a lot easier to assess what's going on with the soft tissues and the ligaments. And that will really determine what we need to do early on for the best management strategies. Because as we know, ankle sprains are a huge continuum. Some of them are very mild. Some of them can be more severe with greater tissue damage along that spectrum. So generally speaking, we used to hear the acronym RICE. That's what you're supposed to do with any injury. You rest, ice, compress, and elevate. But as more and more studies started coming out, we started to find that with ankle sprains, earlier motion and sometimes earlier weight bearing actually leads to a faster recovery, which is a little counterintuitive because it hurts a lot to start to do that stuff initially. So that got replaced with the acronym that we now use called the POLICE method. And P stands for protection. The early phase, we want to protect the injury. If you have a high-grade lower ankle sprain, you might be in crutches, you might be keeping weight off of it for a few days. But if you have a high ankle sprain, you might be non-weight bearing, you might be in a boot for a period of 1 to 3 weeks. That all depends on how much damage there is, where exactly your sprain is. That can be determined by your PT or your doctor. But that's the initial phase, kind of the protection phase. The O and the L of POLICE stands for optimal loading. And that's different than what we used to use for rest, right? Rest and non-weight bearing, stay off of it as long as you can. That's not going to lead the fastest recovery. Optimal loading means weight bearing as tolerated for lower ankle sprains. Use crutches, but start to put a little bit of weight on it. You don't have to go full bore and weight bear right away. You don't have to power through all that pain, but don't be afraid to load it a little. And with lower ankle sprains, early active motion of your ankle in different planes can be really helpful as well. Again, that can be under the guidance of some of the exercises that we'll go over in other videos or with your PT or your doctor. But with high ankle sprains, we want to avoid certain motions, certain weight bearing, be more in that protective phase. With lower ankle sprains, you can protect initially, but move more into that optimal loading zone and start to move it and start to put weight on it and walk a little bit earlier on. Now it's all, like I said, as tolerated. And what that means is don't just throw the crutches out and hobble around everywhere. Use crutches, put a little bit of weight on it. If it's sore, that's okay. That load is going to stimulate the healing process in the ligaments that we need to help them start to remodel faster. And you do that through the day and you just kind of see how your ankle feels. We want to manage the swelling. We want to manage the pain. We want to manage the mobility. All of those different things play a role in where you're at in that optimal loading zone, how long you need to fully protect, and when you can kind of blend that into starting to load it a little bit. I know there's a huge variety there, but I hope that gives you some guideline. You don't need to be fully off of it unless it's a high-grade, high ankle sprain. You can start to load it initially, put some light weight on it, and move your foot early and often within your comfort level. Now the other letters are what we're more familiar with, the ICE of POLICE, the ice, compression, and elevation. And this is common with any injury, especially ankle sprains. Ice it all the time, 15 to 20 minutes every hour or two. It's really important to control that swelling earlier on. You can compress it by using an ACE wrap, ankle sleeve. Sometimes those are painful getting on, but an ACE wrap is a great way to do it because you don't have to bend your foot or ankle to get it on, and you can adjust how much pressure you want to have. You want to go all the way from your toes up into your lower leg when you do wrap it. And elevate it means when you are resting, prop it up, preferably even laying down with your leg above your heart. That's going to allow gravity to help you and drain that fluid out of there. That's also part of what the optimal loading will help, that early motion moving your ankle. That helps move some fluid and manage some swelling in there. So that's the police method. The P and the O and the L, the protect and the optimal load. It's a little bit more of a gray area, a little bit more of a continuum. And then the ICE of the police, the ice compressed elevation, that's the stuff we're all familiar with. But I hope that gives you some guideline of what to do, what not to do early on. And I'll quickly summarize that. If you have a high ankle sprain, you may be non-weight bearing and in a boot for 1 to 3 weeks. That's full on protection, no loading at all. If you have a really bad low ankle sprain, it might just hurt too much to put any weight on it or to move it. And that's okay for a few days, just protect it. But then as you are able, start optimally loading it with gentle weight bearing, partial weight bearing, using crutches, and early active movement of the ankle. It's going to help that ligament heal. Even if it's a little sore, it's going to stimulate that remodeling and help manage some of the swelling. And then the ICE, ice, compress, elevate, all of the stuff that we're familiar with. So try the police method early on, and when your ankle is ready, then you can move into more of the early phase ankle rehab exercises that we'll go over in another video. So keep watching to learn how to effectively manage those stubborn ankle sprains.